Hi, everyone. My name is Cooley. I am the Targeted Outreach Director for the Department of Financial Protection Innovation. Thank you and welcome for joining us for our student loan updates and repayment webinar. It is 12:02. We're going to get ahead and get started. We have a ton of information, some fantastic guests who are joining us, and we're going to just jump right into it. So some important information about our webinar today. This webinar is being recorded and it will be published to our YouTube channel shortly after the webinar completes. All of your microphones have been muted and video disabled, but you can submit questions to us using the Q&A function on Zoom. So please feel free to use that. We do have several staff members standing by to help answer your questions. So first up, we have Bonnie Luttrell, Ombudsman for the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid, who's going to give us updates on the student loan news. Bonnie?
Hey, everyone. Thank you, Co. My name is Bonnie Luttrell. I'm the Student Loan Ombudsman for the Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. As I see the very first question we've received, and no doubt blowing up all of your phones, is the announcement that we have historic student debt relief. The administration just announced their plans to provide debt cancellation for $10,000 for borrowers who make less than $125,000 a year and more if you're a Pell Grant recipient. The key takeaway for this is to know, first and foremost, there's nothing you need to do right now to access this. We do, however, encourage you to reach out and sign up to get the updates. We're going to release more information in the coming weeks. And you can be the first to be notified if you sign up to get those updates here. If you do, this is quite a big announcement. And so as you can imagine, lots of people are trying to get onto the webpage. That has caused some queuing. So if you go and you get, if you go right now, you may get directed to an interim page where you'll be in the queue to get onto the main page with all of the information. But again, rest assured, you don't need to do anything today to take advantage of this. We're going to put out more information. You will be notified. And so, but the key today is also to remember that this is a limited amount. And for a lot of people pursuing public service loan forgiveness, there are other critical deadlines and there are steps you do need to take action. So I think we can go right into the next slide. Okay, so for the historic announcement today is going to provide relief for tens of millions of borrowers, but there's also going to be tens of millions of borrowers who are still relying on these other protections that we have rolled out. When we're going to spend some time today talking about the PSLF waiver, but if you take nothing else away, because I know there's a lot going on, if you take nothing else away from this waiver, I need you to know two things, or nothing else from this webinar. I need you to know two things. First, you need to consolidate your loans. And second, you need to submit the PSLF form. You can do both of these things at studentaid.gov. You can consolidate to pursue the waiver by going to studentaid.gov. In the top, there's a little bar that says manage my loans. There's going to be the option to consolidate online. You may need to set up an FSA ID to complete that process online. And then you need to submit the PSLF form. So let's dive into the next slide to talk about that. Okay, so we have this fantastic thing called the limited PSLF waiver. You may have tried to get on track for PSLF before. You may have thought you weren't eligible because you had the wrong type of loans or had the wrong repayment plan. Through this historic program, we are changing the rules for a limited time to make sure anyone who wants to pursue PSLF can pursue PSLF. This waiver is a very big deal. And I want to note that this waiver is separate from today's announcement. So just, I know that's hard and there's, student loans are complicated, but try to keep that in mind that the limited PSLF waiver is separate from today's announcement. To date, we have already approved more than $25 billion in debt cancellation for over 1 million borrowers. So $10 billion for public servants pursuing PSLF, 8.5 billion for borrowers who are totally and permanently disabled, getting their loans discharged, and nearly 8 billion for borrowers who were either misled by their schools or had their schools closed. So today's announcement's big, but we've been doing big stuff for a while. Now let's jump into some more specifics around the waiver. Okay. So public servants, as I mentioned, we have approved more than $10 billion in loan forgiveness for borrowers under this limited PSLF waiver. We've also brought another 1 million borrowers closer to loan forgiveness. A common question I get is borrowers think that they're only eligible for the PSLF waiver if they're at 120 payments. You know, to get PSLF, you have to have 10 years of public service, which works out to 120 months. You do not need that to take advantage of the waiver. You can only be partway. Maybe you'll only get a couple of months extra. Maybe you only get a couple of years extra. Every bit helps. So know that to qualify for the waiver, you only need to be working in public service, and it could be historical service. You don't actually need to even be currently working. You can certify past service. So again, back to what I said before, the two things you need to take away are certify your employment and get your loans consolidated. Through the PSLF waiver, we've been able to get nearly 250,000 borrowers 2 or more years of extra credit. So 2 or more years closer to loan forgiveness. And these are people that it doesn't matter how large their loan balance is, they're still going to get their loans forgiven in full. But the deadline is October 31st. This deadline is not being extended. You must take action before the end of October to be considered under the waiver. Next. Now, another announcement we made back in April was something called the IDR payment account adjustment. You may have heard in the news things like called forbearance steering. This is the practice of servicers putting borrowers into long-term forbearance rather than getting them enrolled in plans that can get them closer to loan forgiveness, like income-driven repayment. We have we recognize that that's happening, and so we're going to provide relief to everyone who was victimized by that practice through this IDR adjustment. So the IDR adjustment also, it helps you if you're pursuing PSLF, but you also don't need to be pursuing PSLF to get it. You can just you'll get the credit, and it doesn't matter what your employment is. If you have your loans in an income-driven repayment plan, you can get credit, and then you can get loan forgiveness after 20 or 25 years, depending on your loan. For borrowers who, under this IDR adjustment, for borrowers that have 12 or more months of consecutive forbearance or 36 months or more of cumulative forbearance, they're going to get PSLF credit and IDR credit for those months automatically. You do not need to take any action. It's going to happen automatically, and you're going to see those credits to your account later this year. We're also going to give credit for any months spent in deferment prior to 2013. I do want to clarify, though, that this does not include any in-school deferments. So we're not, you can't get credit for in-school deferments, but if you had economic hardship deferment, if you had unemployment deferment, you're going to get credit. You're going to get repayment credit for all of those months. We're also going to continue to count periods of economic hardship deferment, because we know that people who qualify for economic hardship deferment are also going to get, would have also been eligible for a $0 IDR payment. Now, the key here is these changes are going to be automatic. So if you had extensive forbearance, we're going to handle it. You don't need to do anything. You don't even need to raise your hand. You just need to wait for us to catch up, and you're going to see these automatically credited to your account. But if you had less than 12 months consecutive or less than 36 months cumulative, we're still going to take a look at that. We still want to get you credit. But we do need to review those on an individual basis. And so to have us take a look at those, you can submit a complaint at studentaid.gov/feedback. And so I know this was a lot of information very quickly. I am going to have to jump in a second, but they're going to give you more information about all of this and get into the weeds. But the key takeaways here are: one, if you're thinking about the general loan forgiveness today, know that there's nothing you need to do but sign up for updates, and we will give you more information in the coming weeks. If you're pursuing the PSLF waiver, consolidate your loans, submit the PSLF form, and do that before the end of October. That is the most important thing. It has to be in before the end of October. You don't, if it takes us a long time to process it, it doesn't matter as long as you get it in. And then finally, the IDR adjustment, those changes are going to be automatic unless you fall under this threshold here, in which case you can submit a complaint at studentaid.gov. Now, I want to talk for a minute, if we can go to the next slide, I want to talk for a minute about this great new initiative we rolled out to help borrowers who are in default. And so a few months ago, we announced this thing called Fresh Start. If we are giving every federal student loan borrower in default a second chance to get on track with their loans, and we are going to make it super easy to do so. So if your loans are in default, beginning this fall, you are going to have access to Title IV aid again. So if your loans were in default and you wanted to go back to school and you couldn't, now you can. We have reinstated your eligibility for Title IV aid. You can get loans, you can get grants, you can get federal work study. All of those great programs are available to you again. We are also restoring access to federal repayment options like income-driven repayment. So if you were a borrower and who couldn't afford their payment and so you defaulted on your loans, we have options to make payments affordable. Income-driven repayment is designed to do that. If you have a low income, your payment could even be $0 per month. Finally, we're also going to add some credit reporting protections in clear CABRs. I can't tell you how many borrowers I hear from who are trying to get FHA mortgages to close on their home and then find out they can't because their defaulted federal student loan is showing up. You can't access other forms of federally backed credit if you have a defaulted federal student loan, but we have changed that. We have cleared CABRs. You can do that now. We want to give you another chance to get on track here. We're also going to suspend future collections activity for a year. If you're in default, you may know that you can have your wages garnished without a court order. We can take your Social Security benefits. We can take your tax refunds. That's all going to be suspended because we want to give you a chance to get on track with your loan so that we don't put you back in collections. So if you're in default, you can make payment arrangements. We want to help you. We want to get you on track with income-driven repayment, and you can do that by going to maya.ed.gov or calling the default resolution group at that number there. Keep in mind, Fresh Start is available for all defaulted direct loans, all defaulted EdHeld loans, and commercially held federal family education loans. So these are older loans that were made by banks or other private institutions or backed by guarantee agencies. Those borrowers, if you're in default on those, you are still eligible for this relief. And also defaulted Perkins loans that are owned by the department. This doesn't include Perkins loans that are owned by colleges, but it does help people who have loans that are owned by the Department of Education. Next slide.
Okay, thank you, Bonnie. Bonnie Obudsman for the U.S. Department of Education, Office of Federal Student Aid. Bonnie, I know you have to jump off. I know it's a crazy day, a lot of information coming out, and you got to handle all that. So thank you so much for being on the webinar, providing some fantastic information. As a reminder, everyone, this webinar is being recorded. The slides will be made available after the webinar, and it'll be emailed to everyone who registered for this webinar. Again, if you want to submit your questions, please put it into the Q&A section of Zoom. And I have a team who are answering questions when they can. And also there will be a Q&A session at the very end of the webinar. So we'll answer what questions we can. Right now we have Selena Damian, the DFPI Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson, to talk about the California Student Borrower Bill of Rights. Selena?
Hi, thank you, Ku. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for joining us today. My name is Selena Damian, and I am DFPI's Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson. Next, please. And just quickly, DFPI is California's Consumer Protection Agency. I want to give you some numbers about student loan debt. In the United States, student loan debt is now the second highest consumer debt category after mortgages. As of April 22nd of this year, student loan debt is at 1.8 trillion. In California, there are over 3.8 million borrowers owing nearly 147 billion in student loans. In 2019 and 2020, 46% of California, college graduates had student loan debt. 51.7% of those borrowers are under the age of 35. And the average debt load of a California borrower is $37,084. Next, please. Federal borrowers do have some protections established by the Higher Education Act of 1965 that includes receiving written information and loan details, obligations, borrower rights and responsibilities, a copy of the master promissory note. However, these protections weren't sufficient, and borrowers didn't have the safeguards to help them get out of debt. Borrowers were faced with navigating a complex system plagued with predatory practices, and servicers were found to routinely lose paperwork, misapply payments, be unresponsive, provide inaccurate information, or even steer borrowers into repayment options that added to the overall cost of their loans. And Bonnie spoke a little bit about that just a few minutes ago. These unfair and deceptive practices caused borrowers to slide toward default, and student loan debt continued to grow. Next, please. Therefore, in 2019, the Student Borrower Bill of Rights was established. It was introduced by Assemblymember Mark Stone as Assembly Bill 376. The Bill of Rights applies to student loan servicers doing business in California, including state licensed servicers, as well as banks doing servicing. It applies to borrowers with both federal and private loans, and it was codified in the Civil Code section 1788.100. California is only one of 13 states that has this advanced legislation to strengthen oversight of student loan servicers and to protect borrowers. And it became effective January 1st of 2021. The Bill of Rights is a protection basically for to provide rights to California borrowers. It prohibits servicers from engaging in abusive, unfair, or deceptive practices, and it requires that servicers work in the best interest of borrowers. It establishes special protections for military borrowers, borrowers working in public service, older borrowers, and borrowers with disability. It does provide some protections regarding records, regarding capping late fees. Here are some links to the Borrower Bill of Rights, both in English and in Spanish. One of the most important protections with the Bill of Rights is the right to for a borrower to take legal action against their servicer if they fail to comply with any of these laws. You can download the information through this link, and DFPI will take complaints if the servicer, your student loan servicer, has acted unlawfully. We can help you with that. The next one, please. Just briefly, some of your responsibilities as a borrower. You and your co-signer are responsible for repayment of the loan, regardless of whether you graduate from college or dissatisfied with the education. You are responsible for knowing when your loan repayment begins and your required payment amount. Right now, it's extremely important for you to make sure that you know who your servicer is, give them specific instructions on how to allocate payments, make sure you understand your rights, keep copies of all the documents that you're sending in, download any account history that you have that you can get through your servicer. And just keep in contact with the servicer and make sure you create an FSA account as well, because FSA will have information as well as your servicer. And right now with all these changes, it is extremely important. Notify that your loan servicer of any change in address, emails. A lot of this correspondence will be coming through the mail. Again, you are responsible for notifying your loan servicer and school if your name or contact information changes, if you transfer or withdraw from school after a change of employment or any change that could impact your loan. Next, please. This is some information on how to keep in touch with us. Here's my email. If you have any questions about your student loan, PSLF, whether or not you should file a complaint, and then just any other information, feel free to email me. Thank you. And now I will hand it over to Amy Salata. She is the Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrower Protection Center, and she's going to be sharing some great information on repayment options. Take it away, Amy.
Thanks, Selena. Hi, everyone. My name is Amy Salata. I'm the Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrower Protection Center. And for those of you who don't know, we're a national nonprofit policy organization focused solely on alleviating the burden of student debt in the country. Thanks so much for having me today. So I want to start with a few reminders about the return to repayment. So payments are currently scheduled to resume after December 31st of this year. And this is breaking news that just happened today. So this is a very exciting day. I know that this is now a few months away for folks, but there are some things that borrowers can do to prepare now. So one is to update your contact information. Many people have had to move over the past 2.5 years during the payment pause, but you don't want to miss any notices about repayment resuming. So you should get, so to make sure you update your contact information. You should get your next monthly statement 21 days before your next payment is due. And if you made a voluntary payment since the start of the pandemic, you can request a refund for those payments. Your repayments should resume to be the amount that you were paying before the pause started. And if you're already enrolled in an income-driven repayment plan or an IDR plan, as Bonnie mentioned earlier, the recertification deadlines have been extended, and you should be able to, or you should receive a notice before your next deadline comes up. And if you haven't enrolled and you are worried about affording payments when they resume, you can enroll and you can look into income-driven repayment options, which we'll discuss in a moment. But you could enroll in those before payments restart. Finally, if you had automatic payments set up before the payment pause and you haven't turned them off, they will resume when the payments start back up. So if making full payments will be a problem for you, you can turn off auto payments as soon as possible, and definitely at least 3 business days before the next payment is scheduled. Next slide, please. So now at a very high level, we'll review the repayment options available for federal student loans. So federal loans, regardless of who owns them, have a number of repayment options. They generally default to the 10-year standard plan, which is the same monthly payment for 10 years until paid down. There is also the extended plan, which is a lower fixed payment for a longer period to repay the loan, or the graduated plan, which is still 10 years, but it starts with a payment that's lower than the standard plan, and it ends with payments that are higher than the standard plan. We're gonna spend more time talking about the final bucket of repayment options called income-driven repayment, or IDR plans, as Bonnie mentioned earlier. Next slide, please. But then one last repayment option before we get to the IDR plans at a very high level is the income-sensitive repayment plan. This is only available to Pell program loans, so the loans listed on this slide are able to access these plans. And other plans, and like the other plans, repayment is for a maximum of 10 years, and it's based on your income. One really important piece here is that if you have these loan types and are in this SIR plan, you would be able to consolidate to enroll in an income-driven repayment plan, which, as Bonnie mentioned at the beginning of the webinar, could be really beneficial for borrowers given the income-driven repayment account adjustment that was announced in April. So next slide, please. But to review the IDR plans, so there are several IDR plans, but their common features are that they set your monthly payment based on your current income, and they're designed for your payments to be affordable. So if you have low or no income, your payment could be $0 but still count as a payment. Another feature of IDRs is that after a certain number of years of making these payments, either 20 or 25 years, the remainder of your debt will be forgiven. And if you're doing public service loan forgiveness, that the remainder of the debt is forgiven after 10 years. Now, importantly, generally, that forgiven loan amount is considered taxable income at the end of the line, but this isn't the case for PSLF. And also the Biden administration passed a law that makes debt forgiveness tax-free until 2025, or the end of 2025. So we'll have to see if they make that permanent. But the types of income-driven repayment plans are income contingent repayment, or ICR, income-based repayment, or IBR, pay as you earn, or PAYE, and then revised pay as you earn, REPAYE. Next slide, please. So I mentioned that the payments are intended to be affordable. There are specific calculations for each plan to set the monthly payments, which are generally 10 to 15% of your discretionary income, calculated as the difference between your gross income and 150% of the federal poverty line. This is how borrowers can end up with a $0 payment if they have no or very low income. And for married borrowers who file their taxes jointly, the entire household income will be taken into consideration. But for married borrowers who do not file jointly with their spouse, the plans vary as to whether they take the spouse's income into effect. So for example, repay requires both, no matter what, while pay and the IBR only require the borrower's income if they file separately. The Department of Education has a repayment estimator tool that you can use to see what your repayment would be under these different plans. So that's a really helpful tool to use if you're not sure which plan is best for you. Next slide, please. Now, not every federal loan is eligible for every IDR plan. You can visit studentaid.gov, speak with your servicer, or contact a nonprofit counseling agency to get more information on which IDR plan you're eligible for. The nuances are important and a bit more complicated than we can really get into in a large format like this, but generally pay and repay will be the best option for eligible borrowers. FFEL borrowers, those with older loans, will only be eligible for IBR. Some plans require showing a hardship to be eligible initially, but may let you stay in the plan even if the hardship ends. And some plans cap the amount you'll ever pay monthly at the same time, or at the same as what the standard repayment would be, but others don't. And some plans offer short-term interest subsidies for certain loans called subsidized loans, where the federal government will pay the portion of the interest not covered by the lowered monthly payment. And if your loan isn't eligible for a certain plan, sometimes you can modify the type of loan that you have through a process called consolidation, essentially when you refinance it with the federal government to become eligible. Parent plus loans generally aren't eligible for any of these plans, but if they are consolidated, they can become eligible. And also generally, you can switch plans at any time, but some plans like the IBR plan require you to switch first to the standard plan before enrolling in another. So as you can see, picking the right plan can be very complicated, and we'll talk about its potential easy way to do that in a moment. But I want to stress that you should ask your servicer all these questions when thinking through IDR plans. What is the maximum you'll ever pay? What happens to the unpaid interest? What are you eligible for? What happens if you leave the plan, etc. So there are a lot of things to consider when looking at different IDR plans. Next slide, please. In addition to the direct benefits of IDR, which are generally lower monthly payments and ultimately loan forgiveness, there are also indirect benefits. The data bears out that IDR borrowers have better financial outcomes, including with their other consumer debts. And they don't fall behind on their other debts as much and increase their ability to access other forms of credit. IDR is a very powerful tool for managing borrowers' household finances. Next slide, please. There are some other things that borrowers need to be aware of with IDR plans. The first thing is something called negative amortization. Essentially, some IDR payments are so low that they don't cover the monthly interest that accrues. That doesn't mean that the borrower becomes delinquent. It's part of the program, but it means that the interest adds up. There are some events that can cause this accrued interest to capitalize, which means it gets folded into the principal and interest starts to accrue on this larger amount. So the outstanding balance grows over time. That's negative amortization. Leaving the payment plan or failing to recertify on time can cause this. Now, for folks who plan on debt forgiveness at the end, that will include this capitalized interest. But if something happens or your circumstances change and forgiveness doesn't take place, you now have potentially more debt than when you started that you'll need to repay. But although the debt grows, generally speaking, it's not reflected that way for credit purposes, and lenders should use your IDR monthly payment amount to review your applications for credit. One final thing that I want to mention here is that there were some changes announced to the IDR plans just today, And some of these changes are part of a rulemaking process, and they won't go into effect until the effective date next year. So in essence, some of these things are set to change on the IDR plans, but they won't change until the effective date in 2023. So thank you so much for having me. I'll now pass it off to Kate Mullen from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau.
Hi, thanks, Amy. So just a disclaimer that I am making this presentation on behalf of the CFPB. However, it does not constitute any type of legal interpretation, guidance, or advice from the CFPB, and any opinions or views that I state are my own and do not represent the Bureau. Okay, next slide, please. So in case you're not familiar, the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau is a 21st century federal agency. We implement and enforce federal consumer financial law. Our goal is to ensure that markets for consumer financial products are fair, transparent, and competitive. And this, of course, includes student loans. Next slide, please. Okay, so as Bonnie and I believe Amy have both talked about today, there is an announcement this spring about some adjustments that are being made to the IDR forgiveness program. And this also relates to the PSLF waiver that was announced in the fall. Next slide, please. So I'll go into a little bit more depth than Bonnie did earlier. So just to give context to why we're talking about this here, IDR relates to loan forgiveness in two ways. One is that if you are seeking PSLF, then you, under the normal rules, are supposed to be enrolled in an IDR plan, although that requirement has been waived temporarily until October 31st of this year, so that you can go back and get retroactive credit for months that you made payments on other repayment plans. The other way that IDR relates to loan forgiveness is that each IDR plan offers forgiveness directly through that plan after either 20 or 25 years, depending on the plan. Although as Amy mentioned, they did announce that they're proposing a new plan, and that would, in some cases, cut that window to 10 years. So at the end of either 120 payments on PSLF, or 10 years if you do it consecutively, or 20 to 25 years of IDR payments, your remaining balance can be forgiven. Next slide, please. Okay, and Ed is doing this for two servicing problems that, again, Bonnie touched on earlier. One is the forbearance steering, and that's where borrowers ended up in what they considered to be excessive periods of forbearance. And that was a problem because when you're in forbearance, you're not making any progress towards either paying off your loans or towards this IDR forgiveness. And the IDR could have made, usually people use forbearance because they can't afford their payments, and IDR would have made it affordable for them. There's also just been a general problem with borrowers being able to see what kind of progress they're making towards IDR forgiveness. And it's been difficult for servicers as well. So these are the two problems that Ed is trying to fix with these new adjustments they announced in the spring. Next slide, please. Okay, so there's kind of three main things that Ed is doing in order to fix these problems. One is that they're creating new rules for enrolling in forbearances, and they will be auditing the accounts to make sure that these rules are followed. They will also start tracking IDR payments and progress towards IDR forgiveness on studentaid.gov accounts. And then the big thing that is going to have probably the most direct impact on borrowers is going to be these adjustments and revisions for folks who have direct loans and federally managed FFELP loans. Next slide, please. So a little bit more detail about that. As Bonnie mentioned earlier, this will help people make progress towards that 20 or 25-year threshold required for IDR forgiveness. So they will retroactively give you credit for any month spent in repayment status, regardless of whether what type of repayment plan you were in or what type of loan you had at the time. They will also, addressing the issue of excessive forbearance, give you credit for automatically if you spent 12 months consecutively in forbearance or 36 months cumulatively. And then they will also give credit for months in deferment prior to 2013, except for in-school deferment. And then any time in repayment prior to consolidation. So that means that if you have to consolidate your loans, if you have a loan that doesn't currently qualify for this revision and you have to consolidate, then consolidation will not restart the clock as it has in the past. They will still give you that retroactive credit. If these revisions get you to the threshold for either PSLF or IDR forgiveness, then you will automatically get that forgiveness. Next slide, please. Okay, so these are the specific next steps you would want to take in order to benefit from these adjustments. The first thing that you're going to need to know is what type of loan you have. And this, by the way, these general steps apply whether you are seeking IDR forgiveness or PSLF under the waiver. Either way, your first step is to look up your loan type on studentaid.gov and figure out if you have a direct loan or a FFEL loan. If you have a direct loan, then you're good. You automatically qualify for both the PSLF waiver and the IDR account adjustments, and you don't need to do anything further. If you have a FFEL, sometimes also it's seen as FFELP loan, the P just means program, then you're going to want to look at your servicer name. If your servicer name begins with Department of Ed, then that loan is managed by the Department of Education, and you qualify for this IDR adjustment. If you are seeking PSLF, the public service loan forgiveness, then even if your FFEL loan is federally managed, then you'll need to consolidate it into a direct loan because only direct loans qualify for PSLF. Okay, if you look up on studentaid.gov and you have a FFEL loan and your loan servicer does not begin with Department of Ed, then you have a commercially managed FFELP loan. And you are going to, if you want to qualify for this account adjustment, you will need to consolidate your loans into a direct consolidation loan. Like I said, this will not restart the clock. And I want to emphasize that because as you go through the application was developed, the application for consolidation, I mean, that application was developed when, not during this special waiver period. So normally when we don't have these special waivers going on, consolidation will restart the clock on any forgiveness. But because they have implemented the waivers and they have specifically said that consolidation will not restart the clock, you can disregard those warnings while you are filling out the application during this specific waiver period. And then finally, if you have any shorter forbearances, maybe you had 6 months consecutively, maybe you have 30 months cumulatively, those are not going to automatically get revised when they do the adjustments this fall. But you can ask them to manually review your account by going to studentaid.gov/feedback. Next slide, please. And then here's a bit more detail about how to make that consolidation happen. So again, if you have a commercially managed FFELP loan, meaning you go to studentaid.gov, you look up your loan, it says FFEL, F-F-E-L or FFELP, and then your servicer does not start with Department of Ed, then you have a commercial FFELP loan and you need a direct consolidation loan if you want to qualify for the IDR adjustment. So here's how to make that consolidation happen. You probably want to take a look at the FAQ, and you can also call the information center, and the number is here. Then you want to get your account numbers together. You can look at your statements or your studentaid.gov account, because you're going to have to specifically list all of your all of the loans that you want consolidated. And you may not realize until you're looking at all this paperwork that each time you had a loan dispersed while you were in college, it might appear as a separate loan. So you might think of like, oh, I have a student loan, but if you went to school for say 8 semesters and got loans each semester, when you go through this, you might actually have up to 8 different credit lines that you're looking at, and you need to tell them specifically which loans that you want to consolidate. Then you fill out that application. You can follow up with your servicer if you have any questions once the application is in. And then if your revision, you do this consolidation, they revise your account, you end up reaching the IDR forgiveness threshold, then you will qualify for a refund of overpayments if that threshold happened due to payments. That might not be as likely, if you reach that threshold this year during the payment pause, for instance, then you're probably not going to qualify for any kind of refund. But it is a possibility depending on when that threshold is reached retroactively. Next slide, please. Okay, and then here are some options if you run into trouble with your loans with this process. Again, you can reach out to Federal Student Aid at studentaid.gov/feedback. You can also reach out, you can use the complaints process at the CFPB at my bureau. This is especially helpful if you are trying to get a response in writing from your servicer, and that's at consumerfinance.gov/complaint. And then, of course, if you live in California, then you can reach out to DFPI, to Selena to get some help. Next slide, please. Okay, I think that's it. And thank you for the time. And I'm also going to drop now.
Thank you, Kate. So that was Kate Mullen, Policy Analyst for the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. Thank you for joining us and thank you for your contribution in this webinar. A lot of really fantastic information. I know it's a little bit dense, but of course, very important information to know. The next couple of slides, we're going to talk about some other student loan repayment options, especially if forgiveness or it doesn't apply to you. One of the first things that you should think about is loan consolidation, especially if you have multiple loans from different schools or different locations. I cannot emphasize enough that you need to go to studentaid.gov. If you don't have a login, create a login. If you have a federal loan, it will have all the information about your federal loan. So where you got the loan, the amounts, how much you owe, the interest rates, all of it will be in your account on studentaid.gov. It's so important to go there. Also, while you're there, update your contact information, something that Amy was talking about. It's just so important because your contact information is where your notifications will go to. So and also on studentaid.gov, while you're there, while you've created your account or accessing your account, you can also use their payment estimator. As Amy has talked about, it is such a great tool. You could look at all the different repayment options available to you, talking about what your monthly payments will look like, what your how long it'll take to pay off your loan. So again, loan consolidation is an option that will be available for you if you have a federal loan. And again, go to studentaid.gov to check out that option. Forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge options are also available. Some of them are very specific and not all of it will apply to everyone. We will talk about that in the next slide. And I just need to talk slightly about just shortly about private student loan refinancing. I have student loans and I get tons of mailers and emails, soliciting that I should refinance my loan with a company or organization. I will say there's a lot of disadvantages to refinancing your student loan, but I've linked the studentaid.gov has a really fantastic article. It's very short, but very quickly provides all the pros and cons about refinancing your student loan with another company. It's linked right there. I will share the slides after this webinar, so you can click on it, read about it. It is an option, and like I said, there's a lot of disadvantages to it. Just be aware that you may get mailers talking about your ability to do that. And finally, you should never have to pay for help with your student loans or loan forgiveness. There's a lot of great organizations out there, nonprofits, legal aid groups, government agencies especially, that provide assistance to student borrowers. So again, whether it's consolidating your loan or you have questions about what you could do with your loans, or you're seeking loan forgiveness, again, there's so many organizations out there. In the next slide, I will provide a link where you could go look and find these organizations that can help you. Okay. Let's get to the next slide here. Okay, so I know this is a very long list of, forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge options. The big one I want to highlight at the very top is public service loan forgiveness, also known as PSLF. The waiver for the PSLF expires October 31st of this year. Now, that doesn't mean the public service loan forgiveness program will expire. No, that will continue on. It's the waiver that expires on the 31st. So what does that mean? That means that all these other issues that you may have with your loan are essentially going to be waived, right? There's a lot of very nuanced things. And in fact, we recorded a webinar about 2 months ago. I have a link right there on the slide that goes directly to our webinar workshop that talks a lot about public service loan forgiveness. It's an hour long, but we go in depth. There's a lot of great information. Again, I'm going to share these slides so you can click on these links, go directly to it, and get all the great information. Again, the public service loan forgiveness program will continue on. The waiver expires on the 31st. So what does that mean? Again, if let's just say you started working in state government or the military, you just started 4 months ago, and you don't know if you're going to be eligible. Essentially, you will be eligible. You as long as you apply, and then you will be in the public service loan forgiveness program, and whatever months that you've been accepted, you could have those payments waived. So again, click on that link, go watch the webinar, get some great information. I wish I could spend more time talking about public service loan forgiveness on this webinar, but this webinar is not about that. I just want to highlight that as one of the options available, one of the best options available for student loan borrowers. Again, there's all these other different options that are available. In the slides, I have linked to an article from studentaid.gov, which has better descriptions, talks about who qualifies, what loan qualifies, and it's got all the different descriptions. So of these different forgiveness, cancellation, and discharge options. We just don't have the time to go through each specific one, but I do want to put it up here to let you know that there are options for you. And even if it's not applicable for your situation, you may know somebody, right? Could be cousin, niece, friend, neighbor that has one of these situations that may apply to them. So again, here is the link to the article directly. You could go look at it. Also, all of these options are linked to sections in that article. And finally, I do want to highlight one big item. The DFPI has a web page dedicated to student borrower resources. On that page, almost at the bottom, there is a list of nonprofit organizations, government agencies, legal aid groups that provide assistance to borrowers. I know as a student loan borrower myself, everyone has very specific situation to their student debt. And it's sometimes you just need someone there to help you find out what you might be applicable for, right? What kind of forgiveness, cancellation, or repayment options that might be best for you. So if, again, you need help, you need guidance, that webpage right here, dfpi.ca.gov/student borrower-resources is a great place to go to get more information. Okay, so that being said, I do want to highlight the panelists that was featured talking today. Again, we had Bonnie Luttrell, who's the Ombudsman from the U.S. Department of Education's Office of Federal Student Aid. There's a link to that website, studentaid.gov. We had Kate Mullen, policy analyst from the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau. They have a email address there if you do have questions or you need help, students@cfpb.gov. They also have a mailing list that you go to. They publish a lot of great information, anything from consumer alerts to updates on things that are going on. We had Amy Salata, Outreach and Advocacy Manager at the Student Borrower Protection Center. Her email address is there if you need more information or need help. And of course, we have Selena Damian, the DFPI Student Loan Servicing Ombudsperson. Her email address is there. And finally, I do want to really highlight the DFPI's newsletter. It's a monthly newsletter. There's a link right there, dfpi.ca.gov/subscribe. We do these webinars periodically. I'm already been talking about having another webinar, hosting another webinar, which is going to talk about the recent announcement, right, about student loan forgiveness. There's a lot. I just before we got on this webinar, I had a chance to breeze over the webpage. There's a lot of information there. And I'm already talking to individuals about hosting another webinar, which we can dive deeper into the news and the information. What does it mean to borrowers? And the best place for you to stay up to date is to subscribe to our mailing list. When we are going to do or host another webinar, you'll get notified by email. So here we are now at the question section. We have just short of 10 minutes to answer some questions. Let me see if I do have some here. You know what? I did take a couple of them when I saw them come in. Selena, this one might be for you. Does the Student Borrower Bill of Rights apply to non-California residents?
Hi, yes. So if the student loan servicer is operating out of California, yes.
Okay. And what if what if it was a California resident that went to, like, I don't know, University of Texas or something, and they got their student loan there? Would the Student Borrower Bill of Rights still apply to them?
If the servicer is licensed through DFPI, yes. So there may be situations where they are licensed through us in California. So
Okay.
they can always email me and we can check, and then there's information on our website as well.
Okay. Thank you, Selena. Yeah,
But definitely, yeah, there's protections for, it covers a lot of borrowers.
Perfect. Thank you, Selena. So again, if you do have a very specific situation, like maybe you're out of state student, but you went to California University and got student loans, email Selena Damian, the DFPI student loan servicing OBUDS person. She can look into your details and find out whether the California Student Borrower Bill of Rights covers you. So thank you, Selena. One question I keep getting, and I do want to go ahead and just make sure to address it here, is the webinar being recorded? Will the slides be available? Yes, the webinar is being recorded. We will publish it onto our YouTube channel. And will the slides be made available? Yes. Everyone who registered for this webinar, we have your email address, and we will email you the slides as soon as we can after this webinar. So you'll have the slides, and the links will all be embedded into those slides, so you can access all this great information. There was a lot of public service loan forgiveness questions I saw in the Q&A. I will say that I know, we just don't have time to talk a lot about the public service loan forgiveness program here. But again, we do have a webinar completely dedicated to it. Let me go back one slide. We did host a webinar for public service loan forgiveness. There's a link that goes directly to it, and a lot of really great information. Please make sure to check that out. Especially since the waiver ends in a couple of months. So yeah, check out that webinar. It kind of, I don't want to say it walks you through, but it gives you a lot of details on how to get started. Okay, let's see. Selena, do you see any questions, or any other panelists? Do you see any questions that you think would be good to answer? I know there's so many here. We had over 200 questions. Go ahead.
Yeah, I think there's been several questions about those that are in school. So if they're able to qualify for PSLF, you can apply for PSLF once you're in repayment status. So you do have to be out of school and employed by the qualifying employer. So you do have to have all those things at one time, and in school doesn't count. However, the PSLF program will remain. The waiver is what is ending on the 31st. So if you're in school, planning on receiving loans and going into public service, a program as of right now is still available, and I would recommend that people still apply, and even if they're not close to the 120 months, in order to start their tracking of their qualified payments, and if there's any move in employment in the future. That way you're certifying as you move employers, and you know where you are. Plus, it's just with all the changes with the IDR adjustment in the fall, they'll be going back and counting, just giving as much credit as possible. So I would recommend just everyone really apply, look into it, look what options are best, just depending on your loans and your, what your future goals are. I guess if you want to, if you're applying for forgiveness, just check out all the information that's available.
Thank you, Selena. I do see a lot of questions about consolidating loans. Again, if you have a federal loan, you could go to studentaid.gov. If you have an account, if you don't have an account, you can create one. If you have an account, just log in. They have a loan consolidation tool, estimator. So you could look at your different consolidation options before actually consolidating, and you could compare the differences. I've actually done this. I'm in the process of consolidating my student loans. It's easy. It's very easy. It gives you the ability to look at all your different options when consolidating your loans. Do you lose protections? Depends. It depends on the loans you have. I would say the best thing to do again is to go to studentaid.gov and look at the consolidation options. I will say that when you do consolidate your loans, your interest rate gets consolidated as well. So again, just go there, play with the estimator tool, and it'll give you the different options you have.
Yeah, and just a reminder, during the waiver period, I know that during traditional PSLF, when you consolidate, you start your PSLF count from 0. That's the importance of the waiver, that during the waiver period before October 31st, if you consolidate, you will not lose credit. You will not start at 0. You're going to receive credit for your oldest loan. So that's the difference and the importance and benefit of the waiver. So that's why borrowers, we are encouraging for them to really understand what the steps are and how consolidation during the waiver can help you be granted forgiveness through PSLF faster. So traditionally, consolidation does reset your count, but not during PSLF, and with the upcoming IDR adjustment as well, you can benefit from those. You're including those. This will benefit borrowers that have the older Fell, Perkins, Stafford loans, those loans before 2010. After 2010, those were all direct loans. Please email me if you have questions. I know there's a lot of information, but feel free to email me and I can help you with that.
Thank you, Selena. One more thing so I'm seeing a lot of questions about Parent Plus loans. I don't want there seems to be a lot of different scenarios in the Q&A section. The only thing I will say is, again, go to studentaid.gov, log in, look at the different loans. You'll have all your different, income-driven repayment plans, as well as loan consolidation options, and you could look at what you can and can't do. Again, if you need some help, Selena is here to help. Make sure to hit her up and she can help guide you there. Finally, I know we're coming up right on the hour. There's been a lot of questions about the announcement that was made. To be honest, I just saw the announcement an hour before the webinar. I haven't had a chance to really digest it all. I need to get with my team to learn a lot more about what this means for student loan borrowers, but we will be, and I'm almost positive now that we will be hosting another webinar in the future, likely next month, if not October at the very latest, talking about student loan cancellation options and what it means to borrowers. Be sure to subscribe to our newsletter. If you are subscribed to our newsletter, you will get a notification when this webinar will be available, and then you could just register for the webinar. And again, we will talk about the announcement that was made today. So we are at 1 o'clock. I want to say thank you for joining us. I know there were so many questions. There's almost 300 questions that were submitted through the Q&A, and I'm really sorry we can't get to them all. There's still a lot of open questions. We will try to answer these questions offline. But again, this webinar has been recorded. We will publish it onto YouTube, and the slides will be made available to everyone who registered. Thank you for joining. Thank you for all the panelists, and I hope you all have a great day.